literally on September 11th, you had Egyptians volunteered for a Saudi sheikh to slaughter Americans by the thousands as revenge for American support for Israel killing people in Lebanon. And I believe, and I make the case in both books, that they let bin Laden go.
Scott Horton recently exposed the truth about Osama Bin Laden on Lex Fridman's podcast. In this clip, he smashes the myths and the stupid false narratives that were given to Americans, totally lies, during the Bush administration about the reasons Al-Qaeda was formed and the reasons why Al-Qaeda attacked the U.S. on 9/11. Scott's one of the best analysts on this subject, so let's get his take. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Can you linger on bin Laden? So this
Sure.
gave enough fuel for bin Laden to construct a narrative where America
That's
is
right.
the bad guys.
And this is such an important thing. There's this great book by Michael Scheuer, who was the former chief of the CIA's bin Laden unit. It's called Imperial Hubris. And I will say that he went a bit crazy in later years and said really mean things like we ought to help all the Muslims kill each other and we ought to have a civil war over Russiagate, and which I'm very, very opposed to Russiagate, Lex, but I wouldn't go that far. So he went a little nuts later on, but he's a very bright guy and a very honest guy for what it's worth, a very straightforward guy, I should say. I don't know if he's ever told a lie or what.
Imperial Hubris, Why the West is Losing the War on Terror, by Michael Scheuer. And I should also say, echoing that statement, that some of the smartest people I know are walking the line between genius and madness.
It happens.
And when you study the dark aspects of human nature and geopolitics, sometimes it's easy to lose yourself in the madness.
Yeah, it's totally true. But so in this book, he makes it so clear. There are 6 overriding reasons that bin Laden cited for why the United States should be attacked. Okay. And he compared this directly to the Ayatollah Khomeini, who would relentlessly criticize our culture and, licentiousness and Hollywood R-ratedness and all of that kind of stuff as like the degenerate society. But you can't recruit people for a war over that. You know what I mean? Not that he was really trying to, but that only inspires so much resentment.
That's so true. That's a big piece of the propaganda machine, the idea that they hate us for our libertine way of life, our culture, etc. That doesn't inspire people to kill others. That might be something that would make you have disdain for others, but it has to be other matters that are used for propaganda, and that was used against the United States. I couldn't agree more with Scott. Michael Scheuer's book, Imperial Hubris, is amazing. It's one of the best books on the War on Terror. He also wrote, in my mind, the best biography on Osama Bin Laden. It's just called Osama Bin Laden, although it was written before the United States had the raid on the Abbottabad compound that killed Bin Laden. That is still the best biography, but this is exactly right. That isn't what was going to sell people becoming jihadists against the United States, just that we're libertine or have freedoms.
And conservatives don't like libertinism, right? Like that's okay, but it only goes so far, right? Bin Laden, on the other hand, said they occupy the land of the 2 holy places. They help Israel kill Palestinians and Lebanese. They support the dictators, especially in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, but around the Middle East. They put pressure on those dictators to keep oil prices artificially low, to subsidize our economy at their expense. Just think of all the times you've heard presidents say, I'm telling the Saudis, they better ramp up production and get the price of gas down for election day, right? As blatant as can be. But what does that sound like to the poor person in those countries? That money's supposed to go to them. And then, as bin Laden would say, falsely, turning a blind eye to Russia, India, Kazakhstan, and China in their persecution of Muslims. So they say they love us so much, but they don't really, because they don't say anything when this group or that group are the ones killing us. So
that didn't age too well, by the way, based on how antagonistic the U.S. is toward Russia now. But he's exactly right. I'm glad that pop-up was there because he did complain not only in his 96, fatwa and also his letter to America, both of which articulate the real reasons that bin Laden and his minions were upset about the United States and predominantly it is U.S. foreign policy. It was the support for Israel, the assistance in the starvation blockade against Iraq that killed hundreds of thousands of people, bombing Iraq, the Israel first foreign policy. And I think most importantly, and Scheuer lays this out, is the military occupation of the Arabian Peninsula. That was used as the staging ground and as kind of the focal point of U.S. bases there before, during, and after the Gulf War. And according to Scheuer, this is what made tears stream down bin Laden's eyes. It filled him with ire and resentment toward the United States. Now, again, this doesn't justify any of the atrocities of bin Laden and al-Qaeda, but it goes without saying that this was blowback. It was because of U.S. foreign policy that he was able to construct a narrative, recruit terrorist bombers, and kill thousands of Americans. That's the truth, not that they hate us because of our freedom and all the absurd lies we were given by Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz.
These were the things, and look, let us stipulate, Lex, okay, that Osama bin Laden's a mass murderer, and by tradition, I don't take the word of mass murderers for meaning very much, and I don't expect you to, okay? That's not the point. The point is, what did he say that got anybody to listen to him and do what he said? He wasn't in charge of a government. He had no coercive apparatus at all. His organization is purely volunteer-based. And he's asking people to blow themselves up over something important enough to blow yourself up for it. And it's not virgins. It's, we have a policy. Oh, I should stipulate virgins after you die. We have a policy, and we're trying to provoke a war with the United States of America, and you're going to help us do it. Why? Because of these 6 reasons. That's why. And that was what worked to recruit people to attack the United States of America. Okay? Major, important case in point. And, well, whatever, the timeline jumps around here a bit, but major case in point is in 1996, when Israel, under Shimon Peres, re-invaded Lebanon in what was called Operation Grapes of Wrath. And during that invasion, it's hard to believe this. Wait, don't Google yet. Search this part. It was Naftali Bennett called in the artillery strike on a UN shelter and killed 106 women and children in Qana, that's Qana, in 1996.
Naftali Bennett later became the Israeli prime minister for only about a year, I think in 2022 to 2023, but he was a military commander and led a massacre that led to the deaths of 106 people in Lebanon in, I think, 96. And that is one of the reasons that bin Laden and the bin Ladenites, al-Qaeda, point to as their reasons for despising U.S., because the U.S. supported Israel in that venture and really supports Israel in every other avenue, as we've seen ever since, and before that too, by the way.
Naftali Bennett, while serving as an Israeli army officer in 1996, commanded a commando unit during Operation Grapes of Wrath in southern Lebanon. During this operation, his troops came under mortar fire near the village of Qana. Bennett radioed for artillery support, so on, killing 106 people and injured many others.
In a UN shelter.
This humanitarian tragedy is widely known as the Qana massacre.
Mm-hmm. So, when Shimon Peres launched that war, Mohammed Atta, the ringleader of the September 11th plotters in the United States, pilot of Flight 11, I believe, he and his buddy Ramzi bin al-Shibh, they were Egyptian engineering students studying in Hamburg, Germany. And when this invasion started, they both signed their last will and testament, which their friends and family and neighbors and whatever said was their expressed intent that, like, they're joining the army. They're deciding, forget engineering. I want to join the Mujahideen and go fight the good fight somewhere, whatever. Then, just a couple of months later, bin Laden put out his first declaration of war against the United States. It's called Declaration of War Against the Americans Occupying the Land of the Two Holy Places. Pretty subtle, right? And then on the first page, he goes on and on about the Qana massacre and says, we'll never forget the severed heads and arms and legs of the babies and the children in Qana. He told Robert Fisk, I believe, how come your blood is blood, but our blood is water? Well, we'll see about that.
That's a strong reminder that there's a cost to killing people.
Oh, yeah. So what happened was Mohammed Atta and Ramzi bin al-Shibh, they read that declaration of war, and that was when they decided to join al-Qaeda.
Bin al-Shib is still under U.S. custody. I think he's been one of the only few people waterboarded and tortured, by the CIA. Muhammad Atta was the lead hijacker, kind of the ringleader of all of them. I think he piloted Flight 11. And, this is the truth. And if you read bin Laden's letter to the American people in 2002, he lays out these reasons too. So for all the propaganda, how we got that they hate us for our freedom, that somehow, bin Laden was strolling through the dunes in Afghanistan or Sudan or Saudi Arabia, wherever he lived at the time, and stumbled upon the copy of the American Bill of Rights. And that is what, made him radicalized, that made him a jihadist. That couldn't be further from the truth. It is because of U.S. foreign policy. It's something that the CIA used to even acknowledge, a term called blowback, which was first originated by the CIA, but it's what Ron Paul talked about, that U.S. foreign policy, especially in these stupid entangling alliances and regime change operations and military strikes, have notable ramifications and they're bad repercussions. That's what we know to be true.
Was based on the Qana massacre that Israel had perpetrated in Lebanon. So again, we're skipping ahead in the story. We're going to do the whole 90s here, but literally on September 11th, you had Egyptians volunteered for a Saudi sheikh to slaughter Americans by the thousands as revenge for American support for Israel killing people in Lebanon. That, my friend, is why George Bush said the Taliban did it because they hate your freedom. Right, because they couldn't tell you that.
106 people.
And I believe, and I make the case in both books, and probably better in the second one, Fool's Errand and enough already, that they let bin Laden go. The CIA and the Delta Force on the ground were begging for reinforcements, and reinforcements were available. There were tens of thousands of Rangers, or at least, 10,000 Rangers or something, at Bagram Air Base north of Kabul. The Green Berets were fighting the Taliban up in Mazar-e-Sharif. The 75th Airborne Rangers, who are top-tier special operations forces considered, right, with Delta and Navy SEALs, were available in Kandahar province.
This was in Tora Bora in December of 2001. He's exactly right about this. Two of the best, most specialized special forces troops that later wrote about this, Thomas Greer, he went by Dalton Fury, and another special forces operative, I forgot what his name, he wrote the book Jawbreaker. They talk about the fact that bin Laden was in our grasp. They had actually even intercepted communications over, walkie-talkies or whatever communication mechanisms that Al-Qaeda leadership was using at the time. And they let them slip through the cracks. And we have to ask ourselves why, but it becomes clear that it behooved the United States in this war on terror and a war on an abstraction to allow this to be prolonged, to get other things done that had always been part of the neocon agenda, like the war in Iraq, like toppling other regimes like Iran. That was part of the clean break strategy as well. That has become clear. And speaking of bin Laden's reasons for attacking the United States, not only you can read the 96 fatwa, but also the letter to the American people. The ironic thing about the latter is that The Guardian printed that, and then it kind of went viral a few years back because all these young people read it and were kind of red-pilled and radicalized for the first time, going out on the internet and saying, wow, this is the reason he attacked us? That's not what we got in the past. That's not what we were taught in our schools. That's not what our parents taught us. And it red-pilled a lot of people. So what did The Guardian do? Instead of, saying, yeah, we're proud of holding this when many other media agents don't reveal this letter to the American public, they didn't do that. They took it down. They took it down and removed it and explained, well, we want to remove this because the full context before, about this letter and the reasons were not articulated in the actual transcript. And trust me, they don't do this for any other thing that they want to justify new American wars for, like, say, things that Hamas say or the leadership of, other jihadist groups, if they're using it for propaganda.
And General Mattis was there with 10,000 marching Marines. And he could have told them, 10 Hut, go now. And they had helicopters, but even then, they were like 40 miles away. Yeah, it's mountains. So what? Right? And they were not allowed to go and to seal the border. And the CIA and the Delta Force are like, man, we got them cornered on 3 sides. The 4th side is the Pakistani border. They're going to get away. We need more men. In the military, they did a congressional investigation. They just said they had a plan. It's called block and sweep. and make sure you get everybody in between here and here, right? And that's exactly how you do it. And the Delta Force guys and the CIA guys, namely Thomas Greer, aka Dalton Fury in his book Kill Bin Laden, and Gary Berntsen in his book Jawbreaker, talk about how they just could not understand why they could not get the support that they wanted. And Bernson talks about how his boss at CIA went and laid out the desk in the map on the desk. Oh, and Ron Susskind writes about this too, that they showed Bush the map and said, we need more men for this. And they were denied the men that they needed. And then what? And think about this, your whole life ever since then. Talk about confusing narratives from that time. How about this one, dude? How about as soon as Bin Laden and his friends crossed the border into Pakistan on December the 17th, Delta Force is not allowed to chase them. Why? They always say the same thing. I bet you do like a LexisNexis thing from back then and find how many times they use the term Bin Laden and his men slipped across the border. And then once that happened, it's like they jumped into hyperspace and got away. Once that happened, they crossed the semi-permeable membrane that only terrorists can cross, but that the Delta Force, top-tier Army Special Operations Forces, cannot cross into a friendly allied country of ours.
Yeah, this is a great point. We were told so much relentlessly back then that Pakistan was aiding the United States on its war on terror. Their leader, Musharraf, was supposedly close to Bush. And not only did they slip across the border, the high-ranking leadership of al-Qaeda, but bin Laden himself was sheltered from 2005 to 2011 within something like a mile away from Pakistan's version of West Point. This doesn't meet and withstand any scrutiny whatsoever. This was not an allied country. They seem to have been collaborating with the United States, the neocons, the deep state, whoever you want to say, to prolong this war, to, allow bin Laden to remain a figurehead such that the United States neocons could market the fact that the war on terror wasn't over, bin Laden still lives, and not only that, but we have to take the war on terror to Iraq too, a country that had nothing to do with bin Laden. That's the truth, and that's what happened. And by the way, Dalton Fury, I think, died a few years ago. Thomas Greer, I think of cancer or something, but Berntsen is still alive. Both of those books are worth reading, and Scott's exactly right about this.
Pakistan, and where we know from Robert Grenier, the CIA station chief in Islamabad, in his book 88 Days to Kandahar, he had already made arrangements with the Pakistani Army and Frontier Corps that we expect the bin Ladenites to come fleeing across the border, and we expect Americans to be hot on their tail in pursuit. And so they set up deconfliction so that the Pakistanis would not accidentally kill the Americans because they were expected to come. They were not allowed to cross the border and give chase.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Everything we were essentially told about bin Laden and his motives was totally incorrect, but that wasn't enough. They had to allow him to escape from Tora Bora into Pakistan, despite the fact that it was a allied country in the war on terror. Who buys that, by the way, that they weren't allowed to pursue that, with the graces of Musharraf, that they were able to pursue, one of three essential valleys that the al-Qaeda leadership could have slipped through. They didn't slip through. They were allowed to slip through. And the motivations behind bin Laden have been concealed. They've been known about for a long time. People like Pat Buchanan and Harry Brown and Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul did talk about this back in the day as it was unfolding, but their views were few and far between, especially in a media landscape where, a few major networks had cable news and a few major newspapers kind of led the charge on the prevailing narratives, always toward war. And that's what we get. Another thing that wasn't covered here, I think he covers it at a different time, is the fact that the Taliban was willing to hand over bin Laden. The Taliban was not, protecting bin Laden in the ways that they told us. They even, offered to give up bin Laden to a neutral third country, to UN, to another kind of international organization, such that they didn't have to endure the bombing of America. But America was dead set. It was the neocons that said we had to overthrow the Taliban as well. This has to be, something that the U.S. has to do to make a precedent in the war on terror. That's where we're at now. I'm glad Scott brought this to us. Great information here and all of it true. Let me know down below, do you agree with Scott? What are some other falsehoods they told us about Al-Qaeda and Bin Laden? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Lex too. Thanks for having Scott. He's my friend and I really appreciate that. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can support the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.